What if you could sit down once a week with a colleague who's a flat-out warrior? This colleague wasn't a stud in dental school. He struggled. He returned to practice in his hometown, an area once labeled by USA Today as the second worst place to live economically in the United States. And this very same colleague went on to establish an historically successful general practice known worldwide. What if you knew someone that wanted to take you by the hand and show you everything you need to know, from treatment planning to leadership, to maximizing your journey in dentistry, or just life? You ready to be inspired? Welcome to the Lionhearted.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Steve Rasner, and you're tuned into the Lionhearted, where your host, me, believes that every practice in the world, every private practice in the world, could reach the lofty goals and heights of a Lionhearted practice if you're willing to put in the work, the diligence, and the time to make it happen. You know, it's funny, you're going to laugh at this, and it's laughable. I just walked a half a mile. Trust me, I never was a long distance runner or walker, but it's the first time I've done anything like that in 2 months. And I want you to remember this, because this day is January the 20, the day of the that I'm recording this is the 29th, so you're probably going to get it next week, first week of February. But when you see me in the spring, in April or May, I'll well be on my way to being fit. And you couldn't tell that by anything if you just watched me walk. But prior, 3.5 weeks ago, I was in a wheelchair. I mean a wheelchair. Not even crutches. Or not even a cane, which came next. So everything in life is about determination, including the success of our practice. Yours and mine. So before I get into, and you know how I've started out 2023, remember I kept talking about starting over. What would I do to reach the loftiest heights of success that we've ever reached? And I'm kind of going to go through the same process, I want you to know, in my own practice, because it feels stale. Sometimes even when your numbers are good, right? You can sense that things are not flowing as smoothly, as efficiently as they possibly could. And that's how I feel about my own practice lately. So we talked about setting goals. A lot of you responded to that podcast. We spoke about figuring out what you want, what truly makes you happy. Don't ever lose sight of that. Look, I'm just a guy on the weekends, or whenever you listen to me, that gives you 4 decades of his experience and insight. But I've had a lot of things happen to colleagues of mine in the last couple of years, including one a couple months ago, bad things. And you always got to remember, what is it that's making me fulfilled and happy? And take that. That's why I talked about getting a life coach, that sometimes you need a completely neutral party that you can be 100% honest with. By the way, this has nothing to do with my subject tonight. And we talked about that actually in the very beginning of the year. And then I started talking to you about the importance. And if you don't get it from these first couple podcasts in 2023, I don't know when you're going to get it, because I've never spent more time emphasizing the importance of taking time to put productive time on the side. In other words, producing dollars and cents for dental services. How much clearer can I say it? And meeting with your team to forge ahead with success. Because that's the only way to make palpable change. And I talked about many things that I'm going to quickly review. Before I do that, 2 quick announcements. I'm pretty certain that the next podcast after this one, you are going to have the pleasure of meeting Michelle, my 40-year plus employee that I've covered in other many references as my financial coordinator, my new patient coordinator. She's the one that puts it all together. And she has a lot of things that I want her to share with you. You're not going to get to rewrite your whole office from 1 or 2 30-minute sessions with her, but it isn't going to hurt. It's going to help you. So make sure that you show that particular podcast to the relevant person in your office. And the second thing is, and you know I'm candid with you, we have openings in my May 5th and 6th live implant course. And I have no idea why. It has never been open this late in the year, this close to the actual course. And so if you're anywhere in the United States and you hold an active license in your state and you have didactic training that you can share with me for approval, I can't have you come in and place implants if you don't have any training in implant dentistry. It just won't do you any good. In fact, it'll make you falsely feel that you're prepared, and I would never want that to happen. So that is on May 5th and 6th, and you can call my office at 856-692-1370. That's really not the number of the Rasner Institute. You can go online and sign up for it, or you can talk to Shelby or Charday at 856-692-1370. Okay, let's get to what you tuned in for. So in the very last podcast, I talked about agendas that I would start with if I was starting over at this meeting that I talked about at 90 minutes. You need to walk in, and everybody needs to walk into that meeting with a written agenda so that it doesn't turn into just a obligatory, oh, Rasner has a meeting today. Oh my God, let me get through these 90. No, if that's what you're sensing. And by the way, for most of the time that I did that meeting, I did mandate that all my staff come and attend. And I would tell you, depending on the size of your team, if you have 10 or less, I think they all should go there. I think you should have very acute awareness, whether of body language and input, whether everybody in that room is really interested in being there. And if they're not, you can politely excuse them from a future meeting. Nowhere is it written. Come on, man. Nowhere is it written that everybody has the same vested interest in your practice equally. There's no doubt that some of you have people like Michelle. Like I have a staff of 20. I don't know how many. Look up the rule of 80-20. It'll shock you. There's books on it. Something about 80% of your productivity comes from 20% of the manpower and of everything. So, of your time. It's unbelievable concept. I'm just saying, I probably wasted a lot of money, a lot of time. I don't care. Anyway, last time I spoke about things that I think are critical to a lot of you. Like, what do you do? What can you do to reduce broken appointments? That's a big one. And I talked about that in the last podcast, so I don't want to cover it now. We talked about what you can do to improve cash flow. And the only thing I left out on that was this. I'm asking you to ask yourself an honest question. What do you think the temperature is of your new patient exam and your new patient experience? Like, due diligence to that. Like, what's coming out of that? And the only way that you can really measure things like this is to take the extra work required. And you should talk about this in a morning meeting. And somebody's got to track how many new patients per week and month and what came out of that. I hear all the time that so many of you are getting 40 and 50 new patients per month. I don't get anywhere near that. Well, number one, I'm a fee-for-service practice, like many of you. But there's no way I could do a comprehensive, complete exam on 40 or 50 new patients a month. Are you kidding me? And I have a colleague of mine that I really, really like. And he's expanding his office, and he has about that many new patients. And he's not fee for service. You would never, let's just be honest, you would never get that amount of new patients per month if you didn't take insurances. It just would never happen. And this particular doc, and I'm saying this to you because I know this could, many of you listen to me, and this might resonate with some of you. Maybe you're getting ready to expand your office and add 5 operatories, right? Because you're jammed up with all these new patients. If it was me and I had it to do over, I would start eliminating the most toxic insurances and see how that impacted. Let me tell you something. You go out and invest $1 million or whatever it costs to add 5 operatories and have some new construction added on to your present facility. It's really hard to make that back in an insurance-driven practice. So go back and measure, keep track. We measured everything. I'm telling you, at our peak, and sometimes I feel a little off, or I don't know what the word is, talking to you about this because I don't do it as much as I used to. And it's hurt me. I don't think my practice is quite as vibrant as it was. Still did very big numbers last year because one of the cornerstones that I've talked about in my live lectures is to create a giant nucleus of patients. Like picture the nucleus as a hurricane. That's a bad word, but it's a good visual. Because because in that nucleus you're going to have 3 kinds of patients. I'm getting off the track, but I want you to hear this. You're going to have patients out of that nucleus that always come to you. They never miss their appointments. They are lifers. They come every 6 months. You probably will end up restoring them, whatever is needed to be restored in your first 5 to 10 years with them. And they probably won't need much, if anything, for 20 or more years. And the problem with that section is there's not enough of them. Then you have a section of patients that have had big cases by you. And they come and they go. They kind of just drop in. You don't even think they like you because they won't make a recall appointment. They may have disappeared for 2 or 3 years. And then bam, they make your day one day because they show up when they need something big. They may even be going to another dentist, but they come back to you when they need something that they need a higher level of care with. I've had that happen. That's in that nucleus. And then the third is people that never went on board with me. And that's a whole nother discussion of, that doesn't mean I take anybody, because obviously I don't. It just means, I'll tell you what it means. It means when I do a case presentation, one of the goals of your case presentation is for that patient to leave the office with a good feeling about your office, even if they don't accept treatment. Why wouldn't that be your goal? We don't want to shove it down their throat. We don't want to scare them to death, right? And whenever we can, we want to sequence the development of a healthy dentition for no other reason that it would be more affordable for my patients and for your patients. I just don't know enough patients that floating around that call my office and say, hey, I know Rasner's good. I want that comprehensive treatment plan he does. Anything he says, quadrant scalings, gold inlays or onlays on my second molars, the works, free gingival grafts, an implant on a miss. Who the hell talks like that? No one. No one talks like that. No, what you get is a person that broke something. They have a dental need, correct? That's why they called you. And God, I'm really off the track, but the challenge for you and I is to instill the value of a healthy mouth in general, not just the broken tooth. So take the temperature of what comes out of your new patient exam and the whole process. Do you even have a consistent process? Are you on time? Is it orderly? Is there a flow to it? Do you give are you the kind of doctor that is what I just described? Can people warm up to you? Do they trust your recommendations? Or do they think you're jamming dentistry down their throat to pay for whatever they're thinking? And there'll be some patients that always think that. So I left that off when I talked about cash flow because I got to tell you, early in these podcasts, which now go back 4 years, we spent a lot of time on the 5 arenas of my case presentation. And I don't want to take up your time here with them today because it wasn't the intent of this podcast. So, what else? Well, what about talking to those of you that think this, and as an agenda, is why does it seem like we are so disorganized? I'm saying that to you. Some of you may be hitting it out of the park. Doing well. Just came off 2022 is the best financial year you ever had. That doesn't really mean you're doing great. How is the practice representing itself? Let me tell you a situation happened this week. A patient was on the schedule, 2 of them actually, for inserts of crown and bridge. And they were not back from the lab. And that has not happened to me, to my knowledge, in years. And why? Because I instilled a protocol. A protocol is a policy. I hate that word, but it's how we do certain things. And we check in labs the week before. But the person, and when it's not there for a case for next week, the lab must get a phone call from the person empowered to do this. And the lab told us it would be there, and it wasn't rechecked the day before. And one of the patients took off work. And I had a fabulous reputation with him and relationship with him until that moment. I'm not saying he turned on me because he didn't. But it felt really, really sophomoric on my part when I was told that's what happened. In fact, the person in my office who's responsible for that was off on a Monday. This happened on a Tuesday. So again, she called the week before. And the lab said it'll be there. But she didn't call the Monday, the day before, because it wasn't in yet. So that's a panic button. It should have been there by then. And she didn't call the day before because she wasn't in. That's the biggest problem I have since the pandemic. Employees that call out more than they ever did. I have 2 right now with COVID. I mean, I don't know what to say. Do they call out? Is COVID, what is COVID anymore? I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it feels more like it's turned into the flu or a cold unless you have a comorbidity. But we got to go with the rules. We got to go with policy. And I'm sure it's happening to many of you. It is extremely frustrating. So, why it seems like you might not be so organized like I was disorganized this past Monday and Tuesday is because you don't have protocols. So you should have a meeting. How many bumps do you run into in a given week or a given month? Maybe you don't have them and this does not apply to you. So if it doesn't, then don't have a meeting about it. But I think it would do you very well to have a protocol book of your own. And it's a book I wrote 20 years ago. And the book was originally intended just for my office. because for 2 years, I wrote down every time something happened that I didn't think was so good and what I wanted the new answer to be, and I would have my entire staff sign it. In other words, I would take that. The hardest part about that is writing it down exactly when it happens. Because you're busy, you might be with a patient, got to get up, or remember to write, or you won't remember. It's astonishing. And over a couple years, I came up with a couple hundred protocols. And just to let you know how, I'm giving you the chapter names. The start of the day protocol. How do you start your day? Who arrives first? Do they check phone messages? Because that's where cancellations could be left. The 1 hour before you practice protocol. That's for the doctors. Like, what should you be doing? And I mean, these are really, when I look back, they're really somewhere between pathetic. These are all things I did. And funny. So I would come in and I would do all these things, but I wouldn't come in early enough. And I would run late every day, every morning, because I was doing things that are needed to be done. You have to call referring doctors sometimes. You have to, that you refer to, at interdisciplinary dentistry. You have to call the labs, supplies, whatever things that you, the doctor, need to do, a colleague. And that is part of running a busy, successful dental practice. It is. And you have to give yourself time to do it. And I never did. I never could figure out how I could be behind 1 hour after I started. It's because I didn't start. I tried to do things in between. We would have a Monday morning review of where we stood for that month. Some of you have asked me for that. If you write to me at drrasner@aol.com, I'll send it to you. Then we'd have our morning meeting. I also have a blog for that. And that's literally how this book is set up. In a smaller office, my chair is available. I remember writing that protocol because 25 years ago, my practice was much busier with patient volume because I really wasn't a sedation practice yet. And sometimes having a chair available was really a valuable commodity. And sometimes I wasn't even aware that I would have a hygiene chair available in another part of the office for somebody that needed a post-op check that could have been seen in that chair. So my chair is available for those of you that see, they're all little quaint things, but they add up to decreasing potential bumps in your day. And even when you don't have bumps in your day, what we do is hard. So that protocol would have somebody let the rest of the staff know that if you need a chair, my room, I have 7 operatories right now in my practice. And I want to know even now, on certain days, there could be a couple post-op checks after a live extraction or implant course I do. My temporary is out protocol. What's your policy if a patient calls and their temporary is out? Well, there's a lot that goes into it. Is it in the aesthetic zone? Is it an endodontic tooth? Is it a personality patient that's called a driver that wants it in 5 minutes ago? Onward and onward. You know, the front desk business financial meeting, that would go on in the morning and the afternoon. So my point to you is if you feel that you're having more bumps than you should be having, do you have any order? You know, this is why this was created. I forgot to tell you this. I remember telling my colleagues, man, sometimes my front desk portion of my office, my reception, is on fire. Is my cat in the video? Yes, he is. Hi, kitty. That little kitty's 14 years old. His name is Mo. And then sometimes the front desk would be terrible. The people and then the clinic would be on fire in a good way. And so I realized that not everybody knew what we stood for or what they stood for. And I created over a period, as I said, of a couple years, the protocol. And I got that, by the way, from the Four Seasons hotel chain. And the Four Seasons hotel chain has protocols for everything they do. That is why when you go to a Four Seasons hotel and you pull up in your car, from the second you get out of your car, where they know your name, how do they do that? If you're a repeat guest and you walk in and they say something like, "Welcome back, Dr. Smith," or whatever it is that makes the Four Seasons, and I'm sure the Ritz-Carlton has a form of that as well. Making people feel value is an important part of a fee-for-service dental practice. Okay, one more thing. When you're having and developing your protocols, in other words, how does your office run? Is if you feel that you're having more bumps than you should be having, do you have any order? You know, this is why this was created. I forgot to tell you this. I remember telling my colleagues, man, sometimes my front desk portion of my office, my reception, is on fire. Is my cat in the video? Yes, he is. Hi, kitty. That little kitty's 14 years old. His name is Mo. And then sometimes the front desk would be terrible. The people and then the clinic would be on fire in a good way. And so I realized that not everybody knew what we stood for or what they stood for. And I created over a period, as I said, of a couple years, the protocol. And I got that, by the way, from the Four Seasons hotel chain. And the Four Seasons hotel chain has protocols for everything they do. That is why when you go to a Four Seasons hotel and you pull up in your car, from the second you get out of your car, where they know your name, how do they do that? If you're a repeat guest and you walk in and they say something like, "Welcome back, Dr. Smith," or whatever it is that makes the Four Seasons, and I'm sure the Ritz-Carlton has a form of that as well. Making people feel value is an important part of a fee-for-service dental practice. Okay, one more thing. When you're having and developing your protocols, in other words, how does your office run? It might lead you to the question is, do you have the right team to do these kind of things? Do they have the makeup to want to do these things? And you may come across answers that you don't like. You may come across people that I used to call vampires. But what I really meant was somebody that, male or female, doesn't matter to me, that rhymed with witch. There are people on your team that don't want to change. You better face this. There are people working for you, especially when you get bigger. These messages I give you each week are generalized, and they have to be extrapolated. If you have 4 to 6 to 8 team members, you kind of know what you have right in front of you. When you have 16 to 20, it's easy for you not to have constant contact with certain members of the office. And it may take a long time for you to figure out that somebody's half in. And it's hard. But a Lionhearted dental practice, the leader, the doctor, and the manager have put the time in to know who's on and who's not. And it's hard to let somebody go. You'll often, these people with attitudes that run hot and cold, that don't want to do anything extracurricular with your office, right? We're all going out to eat this coming Wednesday night. I guarantee you there'll be the same 2 or 3 or 4 people who won't be able to make it for some reason. It'll be the same people that never can make it, that kind of pretend that they're in to what we do, but they really aren't. And I'm not saying you can get 100%. I already told you earlier in this podcast that you can't. But your goal, especially with the vampires, is if the vampire also is disrespectful to other staff members, sometimes to the patient. By the way, they're usually very skillful. They will, if you're not sure if you have one, they'll say something like, "That's not my job." Okay? They're bold. And they're often very good, or they feel very safe for you to hold on to. So let me tie this all up together for you. I'm telling you this week in our Start Over series that these meetings that you're having every 2 weeks, I said every 2 weeks. I didn't say once a month. These meetings really need to be worth it, doctor and staff. The doctor is taking 90 minutes out of the office. That is a lot. To meet, it takes such courage to do this, guys. I know it does. To implement change. We haven't even gotten to the fun part yet, where we talk about yearly community giving back activities we want to do. This doesn't happen by accident. We did so much through my office when I look back that your host got a United States Congressional Civic Duty Award, which really is earned by my entire team, because it was born in these agenda meetings. But you got to get the basics down first. And that's what we're doing right now. That's why we started at the very bottom with goal setting and what makes you happy, and think about it. And then getting to the things that can interfere with success that are so common, from broken appointments to cash flow, for sure. And I talked last week about getting paid up front. Michelle's going to talk about that with you on her podcast, the next one on, because I know that's such a big one for many of you. Look, I don't mean to sidetrack, but the number one, I don't need 2 reasons. The number one reason to get paid up front is that patients take their commitment seriously and show up for their appointments, which they will if they've paid you. If they haven't paid you, there's a myriad of reasons. You look who doesn't show with you next week. It'll be somebody that has not paid for their services yet. It's absolutely true. I might have saved you 5 years in your practice if you learn that right now. It's not because you want to put it in the bank and collect interest. And then I talked about the agenda of decreasing bumps. And I said it earlier, but I'm going to say it again. Even when you don't have a lot of bumps, the profession you and I chose can be challenging. It is. So decreasing the bumps, I shouldn't have had to cancel a patient's visit last week because a lab case wasn't here. So I reviewed some of my protocols. And when you share that, it means some people are going to have to get duties delegated to them. Because, for example, when the front desk team it's really their job to fill the broken appointments in a given day, right? And when they have people in the office, members of the family of those people, they can see easier than the clinic can. And then they can do recall right then and there to help the entire flow. That's what we need. That's how it all works together. All right. Next week, we're going to talk about the agenda that will take more than one meeting, and it's your path to a fee-for-service practice, which is not a 1 month thing. It's probably more like a 1 year to 2 year thing. Thanks again, guys, for listening. And remember the course on the May 5th and 6th. And have a great week, and see you next week on the Lionhearted.
Bye.